Hello. For this month's issue of the Australian Education Times, we will be interviewing Professor Bruce Robinson, the Dean of Medicine at the University of Sydney. Professor Bruce Robinson was appointed Dean in 2007 and leads one of the largest medical schools in Australia. He has also been the head of the Cancer Genetics Unit at the Calling Institute of Medical Research, and he continues to practice medicine at the Sydney Royal North Shore Hospital. Join us today as he gives us an insight of what it's like to pursue a career in medicine. So, first question, tell us about your journey from school to university and how you ended up as a Dean of Medicine in this university.
Well, my journey began as a school student when, I suppose during my time at school, I decided I really did want to pursue a career in medicine. Obviously worked hard, got into medicine at Sydney University, and then proceeded through that course, and at the end of that course felt that I needed more scientific training, so I then took a further year and did a Masters of Science degree. That got me a bit interested in research. I then proceeded to do training as a specialist physician after having done a year at the Children's Hospital, which was at that time at Camperdown. I went to North Shore Hospital to do my physician training, and then decided I wanted to do further research, and so I went to Harvard Medical School to do 3 years of research training. And then it was on completion of that I returned to North Shore Hospital.
And what motivated you to pursue the specialty that you're researching about?
That's a good question. Often one has a mentor, someone who you look up to, who you work with.
Did you have a person like that?
I did. I had a fellow whose name was Sol Posen. He was the Professor of Medicine at Sydney Hospital in those days. And he and another Professor, Philip Clifton Bly, got me interested in endocrinology, and ultimately that was the project the area that I worked in for my master's degree. And it was really because of those two people that I became interested in endocrinology. I also liked the idea that it was a specialty where there was not only clinical medicine to be practiced, but there was a lot of laboratory work that went with it, because obviously in endocrinology we measure hormones, and we then correlate those hormonal measurements with symptoms and signs that a patient may have, and ultimately treat them.
So for those who don't know, I'm pretty sure you just explained it, but can you tell us what endocrinology actually is?
Well, endocrinology is the specialty of medicine that studies the effects of hormones on different organ systems and on our body. We've all got multiple hormones running around in our body, all under the control of the brain, the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, which then controls the thyroid, the adrenal gland and the gonads to keep us functioning as human beings. Subsequently, I've developed a very focused research interest in tumours that develop in those endocrine glands, so tumours of the pituitary gland, the thyroid, the adrenal glands, and to a lesser extent the gonads.
And what was it like starting up as a doctor, like when you started university?
It was a little bit different to now in that we didn't have information at our fingertips in the same way people do now. I suppose we're excited to be practicing clinical medicine. We were excited to be able to even measure hormones. Even in those days, not very sensitively, we couldn't measure very small quantities of these hormones. Now we can measure picomolar levels of many of these hormones, so tiny amounts of these hormones can be measured in the blood or saliva or other secretions as well.
So did you feel that as time went on, research in medicinal science actually got easier over years?
Well, research has actually opened up our eyes to new possibilities. What I learned when I went to Harvard was how to do molecular biology, how to break genes up. So we then had a whole new area of research which subsequently has informed many of the research questions that we have been interested in, not just in endocrinology but in other areas of medicine as well. So it's been an exciting journey. We've gone from in 1993, when we were involved in isolating a gene which caused a cancer of the thyroid, to in 2000 having drugs available which could be used to treat that cancer. And so this is a very rapid transition in research terms. Normally things in research take a lot longer than that. So I feel privileged to have been practicing medicine in such an exciting era.
And what were the difficulties that came with starting up as a doctor?
The difficulties are, I suppose, anyone has a degree of uncertainty about the extent of their knowledge. When you're starting, you don't have a lot of clinical experience, and so you haven't got the value of having seen lots and lots of patients with different conditions or the same condition that gives you the experience and then the confidence to make judgment calls about what's the best treatment, what's the best way of diagnosing the particular problem at hand. So with experience, some of that uncertainty that you have is able to be overcome, and so you reach the latter stages of your clinical career feeling much more confident in being able to make a diagnosis and offer a patient what you think is the best treatment.
Over your career, what's been your greatest inspiration, you reckon?
I think the time that I spent at Harvard was amongst the most exciting period of my research career, mainly because it was an environment in which there were so many really talented people, and America is very much a can-do place. There weren't barriers really of any sort put in your way, and I was very fortunate to be working in a laboratory which was very well funded, so pretty much whatever we wanted was available to undertake our work. Having said that, whilst that was a very exciting period, I still find one of the most exciting things is standing up in front of a group of peers presenting our research and having it critiqued. That's, I still think, one of the things that gives me the greatest thrill. I also, whilst I don't get the same thrill out of it, I get enormous satisfaction out of practicing clinical medicine. It's a privilege to be able to listen to people, to examine them, and then to help them get better.
Why did you choose to why didn't you choose to stay in America and actually pursue your medical research there?
That's a good question. The reason I chose to come back is, of course, for family reasons. That's the main reason many people come back. And also because the American system was very cutthroat. In the US, you don't, at a junior level, you don't get a tenured position. You get a position only if you've got a grant which can fund that position. And if you don't have your grant, then you're out of a job. So it appeared to me that this was going to be a very uncertain place to stay to pursue a research career, you know, because at that stage, of course, early on, you don't know that you're going to be guaranteed of success. In contrast, Australia presented a more secure and stable environment. Of course, Australia's a great place to live. And for me, it ultimately turned out to be a great place to build a career, to help nurture the careers of lots of other people too. One of the things I'm proudest of is that I've had over 35 PhD students in my time, and those people have all gone on to develop research careers of their own, and that's been very satisfying, very exciting.
And out of your many accomplishments here, what do you think were, what would you say is your highlights for your best accomplishments?
Look, I think that's probably my best one. That is that I've been involved in training lots of other research scientists who've gone on to populate research institutes, both here in Australia and in some cases internationally. That's been a real privilege to have been involved in doing that. Was there any single discovery? In fact, probably one of the discoveries that I made when I was working in Boston is probably the most significant discovery, and that was that we discovered how some of the genes in the hypothalamus that control circadian rhythms are regulated, and how the structure of those genes and their gene products actually has changed.
And when pursuing a career in medicine, what do you think is a key quality a person should possess in order to become a good doctor or to be successful in that field?
Well, the first thing is commitment. You have to be very committed because this is not a trivial undertaking. You certainly do more than an 8-hour day. You have to accept being on call pretty much 24/7 for your patients. So commitment is first and foremost, I think, what you need. The second thing you need is compassion. You do need to be able to put yourselves in the shoes of the patients who you're looking after, to try to make sure that you are therefore doing the right thing for them. The third thing that I think is really important is curiosity. You've got to remain able to question every situation that you confront. Does all of this really add up, or is there something else that could be causing this situation? And likewise in your research, if you've seen 10 patients with a particular condition, what are the questions that pop into your mind about that condition? And is there a common thread that might indicate a cause? Is there a common presentation that might be useful to describe? Is there a common treatment that could be recommended for these people? So being curious is really important as well.
Okay. And as you said, like being a doctor is a pretty demanding job. Do you ever have to sacrifice anything in order to do well as either a dean of medicine or as a practicing doctor?
Well, sure. You have to sacrifice some family time. It's not as if you can always be there as much as other people might be able to. So that's probably the biggest sacrifice you make. On the other hand, there are more upsides, I think, than downsides. The satisfaction that you get from looking after people, the satisfaction and the thrill that you get from presenting your work internationally, the fact that you get to travel to present your work at international meetings, these are very positive benefits associated with the sort of career that I've had.
And what struggles have you faced in your career or your personal life? And how did you actually overcome them?
So the biggest struggle, I think, professionally is actually developing a track record which then enables you to get peer-reviewed funding for your work. I always remember it took me 2 or 3 years when I returned from America to do that. That's very, very challenging. If you work in a very narrow area too, perhaps even more challenging because you're not researching a common condition like breast cancer or prostate cancer where there is automatically quite a lot of funding available. I was researching a relatively rare set of cancers, cancers of the endocrine glands. So that's probably the biggest challenge. It felt like a real uphill battle at times, but eventually, once you do get a couple of grants, they then tend to enable you to gather some momentum, which enables you to get ongoing support for your work.
So would you say because endocrinology is not a very such a mainstream issue that people research about, like it's not?
Well, endocrinology in broad terms is very much a mainstream issue. Diabetes is an endocrine disorder, osteoporosis is an endocrine disorder. There are many very common endocrine disorders, but the very narrow area that I was working in, which is tumours of these glands, tumours of the thyroid, tumours of the adrenal, and tumours of the pituitary, is a much, much more narrow area, much less common conditions, and so getting funding for those conditions is more challenging.
And final question, what advice would you give children, like the readers right now? What advice would you give the children that would maybe want to pursue a career in medicine?
This is the best job I think that anyone can ever do. I really do. It's just got so many good aspects to it. The ability to look after people, the ability to undertake research, the ability to teach people who are coming behind you. They are, I think, the best things you can get from any job. And the fact that it's very varied. You're not doing the same thing day in and day out. My days have a lot of variety involved in them, and that makes work very exciting and very satisfying. So work hard, it's definitely worth the effort.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time for answering our questions. And on behalf of the Australian Education Times, we'd like to wish you good luck for all your future endeavors.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you.